trusting your tires, not trusting your tires. That's a big question a lot of riders have. And the problem is there's no simple answer to it. But I'll probably lead with the fact that the Superbike School coaches, they all ride on slicks, and none of them use warmers. So it's especially after lunch or first thing in the morning, or if it's between rides and it's cold and it's a little windy, or if there's a refuel, then they're going to lose quite a bit of heat. So I would say that the especially the Superbike School coaches are both familiar with riding on cold tires, but also really feeling what traction is available and being able to use that. So, what are your what would be your advice or your best practices that you've learned over the years?
Don't presume that you have grip. You have to go and investigate. It's a lot easier to assess the rear tire than the front tire. So certainly when I'm trying to warm up my tires, trying to assess whether I can start pushing, whether they're ready for that yet, I'll lean on the rear tire a little bit more. You can get that to squirm and move around a little bit, and that'll let you know whether it's hooked up or not. With regard to the front, it's really like whether it tracks the line that you're anticipating. I mean, I guess that comes with experience. You know where the bike should go. And if it's not quite biting and not following the line that you anticipate, then there's a good chance it's just starting to push a little bit. And you need to pay attention to that for sure.
Yeah, that I think is probably the central element to understanding whether you've got grip. And I think I think this is the most important thing for me, at least, is let's say I'm going out and I've got a set of tires that, let's say they're cold, but they don't necessarily have to be cold. Go into a corner and there's going to be a certain angle of lean that you're going to be familiar with. It's not like a totally uninvestigated lean angle, right? Let's say you put it to 35 degrees or whatever it is. You're going to expect the bike to respond with a certain arc,
right,
a certain radius. And what I found, when the grip isn't quite there, you lean the bike in X amount and it's arcing through the corner, but it's not on that same arc that you would expect for that lean angle.
Right.
And then let's just say you go, all right, well, we're running just a smidge wide, right? And this is first, this is the out lap, right? And then you lean it over 3 or 4 more degrees and nothing happens. That right there tells you everything you need to know. You do not have the grip for whatever reason. Either they're cold or it doesn't happen to be a grippy surface, or you name it. But if you lean the bike over X amount and it's not complying to that radius that you were hoping for, and a slight increase in lean angle doesn't bear any fruit, then that's all you need. That's the bike sending you a big letter or tapping you on the shoulder saying, hey man, you don't have the grip.
Yeah.
And I think that the big problem that riders will have is they'll lean the bike over and they go, well, that's not enough. Let's just lean it over some more.
Right.
And okay, it's hard for a rider to understand what sort of radius X amount of lean angle should result in, but I think riders do end up gaining a certain sense of that. It's like being in a car. You turn the steering wheel this much at a certain speed, you're going to expect the car to go over there. But if you go like that and it kind of tracks out like that, it understeers, then the person should be scratching their heads.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the same thing for sure. Maybe a little bit more subtle on a motorcycle, and obviously with a little bit more risk. I mean, if you're steering a car and it just starts to push the tires, you don't fall over.
Right.
I mean, trying to find the limit of a front tire takes a pretty high amount of skill, I think, to really understand where that is. I mean, we just had a wet day. We talked about that, so that sort of amplifies the situation when you're riding in the rain, right? You definitely have less traction, and I think when you lose traction, it's going to be a little more sudden. So you have to approach that a lot more carefully, I think, to some degree. Although it's probably very similar once you get to the limit, even on a fully hot, good quality front tire. There's a point where it's going to start to push. Being very relaxed on the bike, certainly on the handlebars, right? Not having a lot of force going into the bars, not using them to hang on, so that you can actually feel when the steerings are maybe shimmying a little bit. That's something that you need to be able to receive that information from the bike by being relaxed on the bike. I think that's a big part of it, and I've been really aware of when the tire is moving at a degree that is manageable, as opposed to like just keep plowing on until it goes to the point where you're going to fully lose traction.
Yeah, I think that's the situation, is when someone's riding in the wet, they're a little bit more spooked, so they're going to tend to hold on to the bars tighter, which is then going to obscure their sense of traction, or that really that tension that the handlebars have. When they're really gripping, they feel quite taut, and then when they're not gripping so well, they feel a bit loose and vague, and you're never going to get that sense holding on really tight.
Absolutely.
So that's one of those key elements that goes back to, your basic, relax while you're in the corner, and but it's way easier said than done.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, especially when you're somewhere near whatever the limit is, as you say, it's sort of counterintuitive to be the lightest you can be on the bars at that moment, right? But if you really want to get a feel for the tires and what they're doing, and it's essential.
Yeah, and I guess on the rear tires, that relaxation, you can kind of feel the traction through your butt in a sense, but it's almost like you can feel it in your right wrist with the throttle of what you're doing, and then the feedback you're getting through your body to understand whether you've got a really good grip or if we've got a bit of a slip.
Yeah, I mean, even that, I think it's relative to the handlebar position relative to the rest of the bike. So you say you feel it in your butt, but it's really the bike's starting to pivot around the headstock. And again, if you lock that out, it will pivot around the front tire rather than around the headstock, so you don't really get to feel it. You hardly even notice it sliding until it's gone a significant amount.
Right. And then let's just say, so we start off talking about cold tires, and then of course coaches, they go out on cold slicks and they have to manage that, and they do all the time. And 15 sessions a day, they're going out and heat cycling their tires 15 times a day because they don't have the bandwidth to throw them on warmers, et cetera, et cetera. But what about once we do have, let's say conditions are favorable, tires are warm, and then someone who rides up in the country roads is just really wondering, like, how much grip do I have? Because with that big question mark looming over their head, it does put tension in the ride, and I think it kind of kills the fun as well, especially if someone just had the bike go out from underneath them completely unexpectedly.
Yeah.
That's just the confidence killer altogether. But what could you say to someone, or what should they be looking for to try to get that sense, or where should they be concentrating and try and get that sense of when conditions are okay, like the tires are starting to tap you on the shoulder?
Well, it's easier if the tires aren't as grippy. So, the rider that throws a brand new set of slicks on every day or every session or whatever probably never get to feel that. They're always predicting grip or not really feeling any kind of movement. I think riding on worn tires is a really good way to start to feel it. It's one step towards going and riding a dirt bike, let's say, where you're going to lose traction all the time, and you get sort of used to the sensations and the feelings that come along with that. If you have ultimate grip all of the time, I mean, you see it in the racing, guys put in their fastest lap towards the end of the race, where now that they can feel that little bit of movement, the tire will push a little bit more. You're not at such extreme lean angles or extreme amounts of gas or brakes, so you can actually approach that feeling and get some sort of movement before the tire just lets go. And you've got to be willing to push hard enough to get that sense, but also you've got to be careful not to take too big a step each time. Like when we're warming the tires up, I try and I'm aware that warming the carcass is important as well as the surface of the tire. So I'll be pretty heavy on the brakes within a a lean angle range that I know is safe. As you bring the bike up out of the corner, give it a spike, see if it actually hooks up or whether it starts to spin or buck or whatever. And that's really the only indications you've got as to whether you really let the tire warm up and you do have the ultimate grip that you want.
Yeah. I would say for, let's say, your average canyon rider who really just has a big question mark looming over their head, I would just bring it back to what we already mentioned is A, you got to be relaxed on the bike as much as possible. And B, if it is your bike and you're used to riding it, you're going to have some sense of a certain amount of lean angle yielding a certain arc. And if it isn't quite doing that, that's something that's telling you, okay, you just don't quite have that same bite and hook. And of course, you can investigate further by adding a tiny bit more lean angle. And as I said earlier, if the bike isn't responding any tighter of a line, then that really tells you there's something's up.
Yeah.
But if it does actually respond and carve in, okay, things look good, at least for the time being.
Yeah.
But there will be a point as you approach that lean angle isn't going to do it for you anymore. It's not really yielding much of a result. And also, again, back to the feel through your butt and through the hands those are really, really critical.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can get the same thing. Like, I don't know, if the tire pressure doesn't get set properly, you go out and suddenly it feels nervous, right? It doesn't quite feel right. It's the same factors that are giving you that information. It's not quite tracking the line, or it feels really nervous and tippy, and like it's uncomfortable to steer it into the corner compared to what you know it should feel like. I guess you need some experience of being somewhat close to that point to really understand, like, especially if you want to try and warm up a cold slick, right? You're going out on track, tires aren't warm. You don't know how many laps it's going to take. It varies on the temperature on the day, the type of surface that you've got, the actual tire that you're using in the first place, how good your suspension is, all of that stuff. But paying attention to the line and any deviations from your standard expectation of what the bike's going to do, then you can start to investigate it a little bit more specifically. Like it keeps like sliding out a little bit. Like, is the rear tire overly worn? Is it at the wrong tire pressure? And then if you know that on lap 1 I got a little bit of spin there, when you come back to that same spot, give it a little more gas than last time, and it's actually starting to hook up. You're like, okay, I'm getting there. This is working. Until you can like the tire isn't causing you any issue, and you're getting exactly what you asked for.
Yeah, I remember we had one really cold day at Sonoma. It was in December, and there was frost on the bikes in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on track, and I had slicks, no warmers.
Mm-hmm.
So the tires were somewhere in the 30, 0C or 30 to 40 degree Fahrenheit. And I remember going out for the first lap, first few corners, and it just felt like I had bowling balls underneath me. And they were so hard, and I probably could have pushed the bike as fast as I was riding, but it's certainly not a situation I would ever want someone to enter into. With that said, as I went around and the tires got a little bit of heat in them, a little more, you could really sense, okay, I'm getting a little more grip. And of course, on a really cold day like that, it's going to take probably a full 3.5 laps before you're going to get up to whatever temperature it's going to eventually arrive at. And that being thrust into a situation like that does actually create that experience and that skill that, you're not going to do that. You're not going to, okay, at this school, we're going to cool our tires down to 35 degrees and there'll be slicks. And you're just like, no way, you're not going to do that. But having been in that situation a few times, you do start to get that sense.
And there's actually, like you reminded me, there's a kind of a feeling. It moves from stiff and hard toward plush,
Right.
and you start to get that sense that the tire's actually moving a little more, and it's starting to push into the ground. And like with the rear tires, with the slicks that we use, they need to spread the contact patch, and you can start to feel that happening as well. So that there's the tire's warm enough that it's allowing it to do that.
Yeah, there's another thing. Actually, I forgot to say it, but it's huge. And it really depends on the bike and the profiles you're dealing with and so on. But put a bike into a turn where the grip isn't there, whether it's from cold tires or you name it. They tend to want to stand up and go wide. But then as the grip gets better, they tend to want to hold that line and not require like a constant bar pressure to stay in the corner.
That's a good point.
And that's something I look for, is like how much bar pressure does it take to keep the thing in the corner on the especially first two turns on a cold track or something.
And then the other element is the harder you push, the quicker you warm your tire up. So there's like this sketchy little line that you got to walk to try and get the tire up to temperature. Back in the day, I did some club racing and didn't have tire warmers when all my competitors did.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't always work out great, turn one, but if you were willing to, have the thing push and slide and buck around a little bit, you could get the thing up to temperature considerably quicker.
Yeah, that's what Wayne Rainey did especially in when he was racing in 500cc World Championship. Whenever he would go out in practice, he would push hard right from the very get-go on cold tires, because back then they didn't have warmers either.
Right.
So it was that first lap where if he got a good start and really had a good sense of how far he could push a set of cold tires, and of course they're not going to be cold, depending on the day, but then he would be able to create a gap that, let's just say the competitors were going the exact same speed. Well,
yeah, he's already got.
Yeah, you got a 4-second gap, and in person seconds going exact same speed, they're never going to close that gap. It's never going to happen.
And he did that a lot.
Yeah, he did that quite a bit, and it was really cool watching him. For anyone who has access to the historical races of him on the Marble Yamaha, especially lap number 1, you could see that bike really moving around, and you could definitely identify his flat track heritage.
Yeah, I mean, so you talked about dirt. Once you're comfortable with the bike going sideways, sliding around, like you stay relaxed, you're able to manage it, then that's a significant advantage for sure.
Yeah. There have been a few. I remember I was at the track one morning. Someone was riding their bike over to Tech, and it was a cold morning, and they had slicks, and I heard, vroom, and I'm like, oh. And the guy was fully bewildered. He what happened? I said, oh, well, your tires are cold. Oh no, that was not the reason. It was something else. And I went, no, that's what happened. And it took like 5 or 6 people, different people saying the same thing to finally convince him that the cold tires were what did it for you. And I think, especially when someone moves to slicks, I was talking to the Dunlop engineers about the chemical composition of a slick tire and of a street tire are worlds apart. They've got nothing to do with each other,
right,
really, because the point at which the rubber goes from brittle to gummy is much higher on a slick, whereas you can get a street tire that it's below freezing and they're fine. They still work. Right, but a slick, if you're out in freezing temperatures and you take a slick and you drop it from shoulder height, they'll
crack.
They'll crack. But sometimes they'll shatter and big pieces will break off of them, like shards. And most people don't realize that, especially when if it's a cold morning, we're throwing tires out of the truck. You can't throw a slick out of the truck, otherwise it'll crack. Yeah.
Well, do you remember my famous Daytona tire experience?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, special tire made for running the banking.
Yeah, and then on the left side is there's that strip is super hard.
Yep, and it was like about 34 degrees, I think, at streets. I went out in the morning. First two turns were right-handers. That kind of went okay, what I expected. First left-hander, literally like maybe 5 degrees of lean angle, and the back tire just started to come around, and there was no saving that.
Yeah.
And I seem to remember you actually rang Dunlop, because we didn't even know that was a Daytona tire.
Right.
I mean, it looked great. I'd put it on my bike. I was like, yeah, I've got a sweet tire today.
Yeah.
But they said, you did what? You rode without tire warmers on a Daytona on a 34-degree day.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a bowling ball.
Asking for it. Yeah. The whole topic though of grip. I really wish that I could tell somebody how much grip they have or whether or not you can trust your tires. But I don't think we actually said it. But no, you cannot trust your tires. I'm sorry. You cannot trust your tires. You need evidence. Even if you're riding the same tires as somebody else and you're on warmers and everything's great and you can't use that phrase effectively. Yes, I understand if all the conditions are perfect, that someone should be able to just throw caution to the wind and throw it into a corner. But it's such a bad habit to even get into. You need evidence. You have to put it into the first corner with a tiny bit of lean angle, see where it goes. Tiny bit more, tiny bit more, tiny bit more. And okay, great. Now we know, but you have to look for evidence. You can't just say, trust those tires. Maybe someone's talking to their friend who's going super slow and they're saying, no, trust the tires because they're only leaning it over 5 degrees. Okay. You can say, hey, based on what I'm seeing, you can lean it over more and you'd be safe. I mean, we do that from time to time. But when it's just the rider and they don't have anyone to give them feedback, you're just going to have to look for the evidence yourself.
Absolutely. Stay relaxed and it will tell you.
Yeah.